All right. Starting to stream. I thought I was going to open this before, but I didn't. So here we go. Sorry. So I got that ready. Hopefully it's not going to kill too many ears. And let's go ahead and open the live stream area as well, so I can see all of your happy faces and what you guys are typing. So I had wanted to do a video just kind of doing like a Q&A about losing a bunch of weight. So I wanted to know if just like some questions that I should cover. Should it be, I think it should be a live stream. But that was just something I had thought to do. So just out of curiosity, if anybody would be interested in that. I'm not sure what my look is going for today. I'm thinking like that after the bad stuff gets solved in like a Tim Burton movie, and then the characters are still kind of dark, but their clothing is a little lighter. I guess that's what we're looking for today. Hello, Chris. How are you doing? I don't know how many viewers it shows that I have, but it says 5 right now. Okay, that's nice. I guess I should put something in my community, right? Currently doing a live stream. I think I forgot to post about that. I think some people get more edits and stuff. How long ago were those pictures? The before pictures probably from 2004. Yeah. The after picture, that was from after I was here. 2014? So I guess they might be 10 years apart. Maybe. Obviously for my current pictures and stuff, it's, you know, it still have maintained the weight loss, you know, so that's nice. But yeah, I guess it didn't take 10 years to lose the weight. It took like 10 months, but it's kept off. I did have a regain portion, but I didn't gain as much back. So after I got out of the military, couldn't exercise like I was used to, was still overeating. And so I had put on a lot of weight. I was drinking a lot as well. So I'd put on a lot of weight just from those extra calories, right? And I went back up to about, I think it was about 200 pounds. It was around 90 kilos. And then I did lose that, yeah. No beads, but happy Fat Tuesday to y'all. Yeah, I got like a Metatron's cube hanging out. That is a type of turquoise bead, I guess. But yeah, I've actually never done any Mardi Gras or anything like that, no. Yeah, the look I think is very not dramatic. Maybe the lip I think is too dramatic for this to be appropriately Edwardian. And then the eye makeup, it's got some shine to it, and then there's this darker black going on. I was hoping for a red, but I don't know what I did. I was kind of in a rush. So that's the reason. So just kind of went for, okay, that's what we're doing today. But yeah, the hair, honestly, the hair is very easy to put up. So it's kind of nice to have that out of the way kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know if any of you were curious or had common questions that you wanted me to address in a video. So the idea would be to let people ask me questions during the live stream, of course, but also to have some questions to go through just in case there was a lull in the chat. Yeah. I look like a Creole lady from Antebellum. I don't know if I know that Antebellum, but Creole I will accept. Get some of that fine Louisiana, what is that, voodoo? That's a good time. That's a fun time. Voodoo's an interesting religion if you guys have not checked it out. There's a lot of overlap, I would say, between like Pentecostal Christianity and voodoo. Yeah, for sure. But for those of you that don't need to lose weight, are there any questions that you may have had just to see, like, hey, I've heard people say this thing about their reason for being obese. Is there any truth to that? So if you have any questions like that, something like that would also be good to discuss. So one thing that I've heard a lot of people kind of parrot is this idea that some people have medical problems that make them gain weight, and that's just not true. There are medical issues that can affect your metabolism. There are medical issues that can affect how you process fat and where you store fat. But there's nothing that will make you gain weight for calories not consumed, if that makes any sense. So, of course, you're storing excess calories. That's what that fat storage is a storage of excess calories. So that's your energy, right? You're converting energy and storing energy for future use. That's the whole concept of this. So to be able to do that means you're consuming too many calories for your metabolism. Now, you can get in situations where your metabolism does get messed up. That's where I'm at because the studies have shown being really large and then losing a certain amount of weight, that leads you to have long-term metabolic slowing, basically. Not awesome, but that just means I have to eat less. That's all. Yeah. I'm expecting snowstorms over the next few days, but at least we got on top of immediate challenges with work and with the other things I had on the procrastinated list. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you were able to get on top of immediate stuff. Pokemon Go says it's snowing, but I don't see it snowing. But I think it's getting kind of snowy in a few places right now, which sucks. It's February. We kind of thought we were past this, and unfortunately we are not. Yeah. So I hope you guys are doing okay. We did have a break last week for Lunar New Year, but I just had migraines just forever. It was not a good time. The one video I was able to make, I'm glad I was able to make it, but unfortunately couldn't do anything else pretty much for the whole darn weekend, so that really sucked. Recruiting new employees / co-founders will be a challenge, as I've not gotten good at that skill and need to be able to find really good people, but it's doable, just a matter of timing and minor luck. Definitely minor luck. I would say timing, I think now is a good time. I think there's a lot of people that are in need of work, so I guess this is now a higher chance to find unemployed people that are skilled, that are in need of a job pretty soon. So I would say that this is a good time for that, for sure. As for finding new employees, do you have anybody that is already good at that skill? Do you know what I mean? Like a friend that you can rely on, like you trust their judgment for that. I guess I've never hired anybody. But I've been part of the hiring process. It just wasn't my decision. The people in charge said they wanted my input, and then when I gave it, they were like, yeah, we don't care. Thanks for wasting my time. If that's what you're gonna do, fine, but don't lie to me and say that you're have me spend hours after work for free to help with something, and then that you've never needed my help with. You had already decided in advance that you're not going to do that. But I would just start with stuff that bothers you about previous workers or previous employees or previous co-workers, so people that are on your level. See if they are able to handle certain things. If a previous employee, for example, was always late to work and blamed transportation, then you could start off with, do you have reliable transportation? Obviously, that's not going to really apply during the coronavirus and Zoom situation that we have. But there would be other things too, like if you felt that your previous worker mishandled a very serious situation, introduce a similar situation during the interview and say, if that was presented to you, if you found yourself in this position, how would you tackle it, and see what they say. That's something that when there's new people that come to work, I've been there for a while, so a lot of times I will help them. I start off with some of those things that I've noticed other people have not handled well. And so I want to throw it out there because it's going to happen, and I need to know what is their natural response to it. If their natural response to it is inappropriate, then I have to help them on steering, into a more correct type of response. Yeah. Yes, COVID does work in your favor. If you're friends with a recruitment contractor, fantastic. Yeah. It does raise the cost. That is true. If you have personality mismatches as well, like you're mentioning here, I would also ask about that. How would you describe your personality? Or are you the type of person that in X situation you do A, B, or C? Which one most matches your personality? And let them know, hey, there's no wrong answer. We just want to get an idea of your personality to see if you're going to be a good match for us. It's not, and then let them know, this isn't 100% a make or break kind of thing. If you have some personality traits that don't necessarily jive with us, those of us that are currently working here, that's not something that we're going to deny you employment for. So that way they're not so stressed, and they don't have to feel like, oh, I gotta predict what's this person may be like and then answer the question how I think they might answer it. But yeah, that's one thing I would recommend. And see how they answer that question. What is a thing that's a negative, or what's been a negative thing for you in the past, or in past jobs? What are some of the constructive criticism that you've received? Maybe don't phrase it in a negative way, but maybe in the past, what are some things that your previous employers or managers had given you as a point to work on? I was told by my father, who is in the boomer generation, the way that you always want to respond to that question is a thing that's not really bad, but it's like a humble brag, and that's total crap. We're not looking for a humble brag. We're looking for, you're an imperfect being. What is going to be a place, an area where you're weak? How have you dealt with that? That's another question. What would you find is a strength of yours? What would you find is a weakness of yours? How have you compensated for that weakness? How have you nurtured those strengths? So you definitely want to not only have an idea of what this person is like, but how they might rise to a challenge, or do they crumble? So those are some things that I would recommend for sure. The humble brags don't work. I know. Mine, not the humble brag, but the thing that I tell them is, if something is a rule or a safety regulation, I will follow it. And if I have to report it, I will. If the management does not fix it, I will report it to appropriate authorities, and it will make the company look bad. I will do that. And for people that are really good on safety, they don't have a problem with that. For some reason, a lot of people let safety issues kind of slide. So when they hear, I'm going to get outside eyes to look at this. Like if I look at the last time the elevator was checked, because they have that little note thing in there, right? And I see that it's been 6 months since we've had an update, and it's supposed to be checked every 4 months, I'm going to contact them and make them come here. And I'm going to report you for not doing it. You know what I mean? And I tell them that. I'm like, I am that jerk. I do not mess around with building safety. I don't mess around with human safety. I've seen too many things happen. I don't care if it works for you. I don't care if that's the way we've done it. I will do this. I am that jerk. I am that one that's like a narc. Like, I will do it. So again, if they're the, into safety, cool, but Most people don't like hearing that. But that's a thing that I don't see as a flaw, but I know other people get very frustrated about it. So, yeah. I don't get it. Is that in South Korea or the U.S.? Which one is what in South Korea or the U.S.? I've always hated psychological examinations because I'd be sitting there trying to think of the right answer to give the employer that they wanted to hear. No, I really do not recommend doing that as an interviewee. I don't recommend doing that. The reason is that it's going to be too stressful for you to fake it constantly. And a lot of times the person can kind of tell if they're one of those, if they have the job as like a hiring manager because they've had experience with it. You know what I mean? They know how to kind of read people. They're going to notice, wow, that took kind of a while to answer that question in a somewhat unnatural way. I don't know if I can trust this person to be honest with me. So when you have that answer that sounds like very diplomatic, almost servile in a way, yeah, that's not, that just comes off as like, you're a liar. We don't want to hire this person because they're not even honest with who they are. Do you know what I mean? How could I trust this person to be honest with me if they're not even being honest with themselves, kind of thing. If I could hire you, I would in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, people with several years of programming experience. You know what? If you want, I can try helping you with interviews on Zoom. So we can both be in the Zoom call, or I can help with that. And then I can ask like questions that maybe you might not think about. But I would definitely write down some stuff like, these are the problems I had with previous workers, and just write them down. Not just in your job, but things that you could have done, or things that you've noticed in previous jobs that were similar, and also things that you might anticipate. So we may be getting more and more people, like for example, if you're hiring an employee, you know, in the future we predict this much growth. That means with your experience by that time, you would probably be in a training or manager position. Would you be comfortable with that? Have you had experience being a manager? Have you had experience training people? You know, what is your leadership style? Those kinds of questions would be appropriate to ask, I think. Hello, Mills. How are you doing? Interview is known to be the worst way to judge applicants, but it produces very consistent results. Right. It's difficult. It's difficult. However, I will say that more often than not, if there's a red flag, those people tend to be, you shouldn't have hired. You know what I mean? Or another way to say it is, whenever I've had to work with somebody and that person has been just like a giant mess, I always ask, like, how were they during the interview? Just because I'm curious. Well, we weren't really sure if we should have hired him, but we decided to give him a chance. That's always the phrase. Well, they were a little weird, but we didn't want to judge him because of that, and so we hired him, and now we're in this mess. Without fail, it's like that. There are some people that, like a good employee, they could have just botched the interview in some cases, but the bad employees, I've noticed, they consistently botch the interview. The other thing you really want to do is contact the previous employers. I think in the US there might be a thing like where you have to ask them permission to do that. If they say no, red flag. Absolutely. And if you ask them why, and they say, well, because they all hated me and they both... If every job that you go to, all of your coworkers, managers, and bosses hate you, maybe the rest of the world isn't evil. Maybe you're the bad one. Do you know what I mean? Maybe there's something about your personality or about your work ethic that all of your previous employers hated you, you know? So that's a red flag. If somebody had asked me, you know, can we contact your previous employer? Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that my employment record, I am confident enough that my previous employers will just say, yes, this person is great for all of these reasons. They can do this for all of these reasons. Any of the negatives I would have already explained in the interview anyway, so it's not going to be a surprise. It'll just verify that I'm not lying. So those are, you want someone with that kind of consistency, I would say. If they're too scared to let you contact previous employers, I would just, no, just not. Unless they can give a really good reason, like I had some type of sexual harassment thing and I had to sue them, so they're not happy with me, but you can contact my previous employer. Okay, that's something that sounds true, right? That sounds like it could be a reasonable thing. I would still ask, do you have any previous coworkers or managers at that job where you did file the lawsuit that understood you and you would be comfortable with us talking to them about your job performance? That's something that would be an appropriate thing to ask as well. Let's see. You're down with the sickness. You tested positive for COVID. How are you feeling? Are you down with the asymptomatic sickness or are you down with the sickness? I, as far as I know, have not contracted COVID, but I have contracted ultra migraines. Pew, 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 pew. So, it's not a great time. I'm feeling pretty okay today. Might be getting a migraine later on. Almost had one this morning, but I think the weather had altered, and so that's why it's a little bit better now. Very little of what is described would matter in my case, that I've combined criminal and psychiatric history and would never be given a chance at that kind of job anyway. Yeah, I think it depends on the type of job, and it would also depend on anything that you can show that demonstrates you're making an effort. So something like, you can, if you had some type of parole, for example, and you had a parole officer, then instead of saying, all right, you can contact my previous employer, I would also say, you can contact my parole officer, and my parole officer can tell you, this about me. If you had any kind of addiction stuff, and that's why you got sent that's why you were sent to prison, for example. But you've done something like joined some kind of recovery program, I would say, yeah, you can contact my sponsor or something like that. So this way it shows this happened in the past, but that's the past. And here are the ways that I'm trying to make up for that. I don't know if it would necessarily be appropriate to say you can contact my therapist. There's things, of course, they won't be able to tell you, or tell the employer because of that doctor-patient confidentiality. But they can definitely say this person consistently shows up to their appointments. This person is making progress. Every time I set a goal, my patient meets it. So something like that. As an employer who's potentially looking to hire you, that's something that I would be interested in. It's one thing to go through life not doing something illegal and or not getting caught doing something illegal. That doesn't mean that you're making progress as a human being. You know what I mean? So I would rather, I feel, give somebody that is making progress to better themselves. I would probably rather give somebody like that a chance as opposed to some other person that's just okay. If the other person that never, went to prison, never had a run-in with the law, if that person was a very exceptional candidate, I would probably choose them. But if it's a person that is just a regular person, they're very middle of the road, kind of just went through life, versus you that's making that progress and showing all that effort, I would definitely choose you over them. Absolutely. Chris, we can talk about it. The salary or something, I don't know, because I don't want to have to pay taxes. We could do something where you give me a gift card or something, and then I can buy more junk on Amazon, I guess. Something like that would be fine. Let's see. I have been saying if you have a long line behind you in the buffet, something's wrong with you. Right. That's definitely good to think about. How does the weather affect migraines? Is it air pressure or humidity? It's both. That's a great question. So people with chronic pain, that includes things like arthritis. It includes things like previously having broken a bone and that bone has healed. For some reason, they're not 1,000% sure why it happens. They just know it does happen. The increase in air pressure and or increase in humidity. So humidity over about 80%, or any increase in air pressure tends to trigger this kind of pain. Drops in air pressure will also trigger this pain. Again, they're not 1,000% sure why this happens, but they know it does happen. So that's, I tell people I'm like the worst X-Men. I'm reverse Storm. Storm affects the weather, but the weather affects me. Like, that's the worst X-Men power, right? It's like, oh, I'm so glad that we have Ms. Lemon with us because, wait a minute, oh, it's gonna rain. We shouldn't have that picnic today. We'll have it tomorrow. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad that we have Ms. Lemon to help us out with that. You know, it's a very lame superpower. Yeah, it doesn't help at all, unfortunately. Yeah. Let's see. Actually, down with the sickness. Breathing's really labored, frequent headaches, easily fatigued, usually having issues with confusion and attention. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope that you get through it quickly. Do you have any ways to alleviate any of those symptoms? If I had a recording of an employer time and time again screaming, yelling, threatening, and physically bullying me, does that count? Yeah, I would say that I would hope that you would have taken that to a prison or like a lawyer or something, you know. That's what I would hope. You are in love with Amazon. That's what Nikki says. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely helpful to buy a bunch of stuff. I think that retail therapy is something that a lot of us can identify with, especially during this time where we're all kind of stuck mostly indoors, for sure. We're still waiting on the vaccines, as far as I know, in Korea. So we'll see. Don't know what's coming up next, but hopefully it'll be in the right direction. Yeah, I know we have the variant. So we have that more contagious variant from the UK, or that at least was first spotted in the UK. So we did get that, unfortunately. So I'm not sure. The government had reevaluated. Should we increase, decrease, or keep the level? So we kept it the same. So we're at 2.5. 3 is the highest. So we're still at 2.5. We can still go out and do stuff. We can go to a cafe, for example. Some places don't let you sit down, but other places like restaurants, they will allow like half capacity. So there's seats and things that they're not allowed to sit people at. And so that's something. And there's also, we still use the QR code to track. So if somebody does get sick, you know, if they're at a restaurant at 3 p.m., then everybody else that was at that same restaurant at 3 p.m., they can check because all of us have signed in with a QR code. And then all the places we've been on that day or since that day that we had to use a QR code to sign into, then they notify people that were there at the same time and just let us know, hey, somebody that had COVID was in your same airspace at this time. You should go get checked, you know, that kind of thing. I recently finished my prescription for prednisone to open up my lungs, doxycycline to treat the infections I had, IV Bamlanivimab ding dong is what I'm going to say, an antiviral that got emergency approval from the FDA. Gotcha. Well, you're also getting experience pronouncing different medications. The only thing that I can recommend, just as somebody who's had to deal with a bunch of medical problems, I don't remember, Mills, if you've had to deal with a bunch of medical stuff. Kitchen Nightmares is really good. Gordon Ramsay just yelling at people, that's a good time. Because you feel like you're mad and you want to yell at stuff too, but you just can't because you're just in too much pain. So hearing Chef Gordon just yell at everybody, that's a good time. Hell's Kitchen, you know, those are good. Watch it without the ads. Because the ads will just, I'm not about that life. You guys notice I took ads off of all my videos and stuff too. Let's see. Should China face any kind of consequences for allowing the coronavirus to get out of hand? I am gonna say no. Um, with an asterisk. I think that I'm not sure what we could say, but at the same time, it was all of our duties to also not let the virus get out of hand. And I tell the students about following directions, and there's times when I will write directions on how to do the homework, and the students will just default to some concept of homework they had from the past, and they don't even read the directions, and they just get a 0 on everything. For that assignment, they have to redo it. And I tell them, following directions is really, really important, and I want you guys to know how to do that. Can you imagine if people just followed directions, we wouldn't even have had a pandemic. If we just followed directions. So it getting out of hand in China, China's fault, for sure. But it getting out of hand in every other country after that, that's everybody else's fault. Do you know what I mean? We knew there was a problem. While we were in lockdown in Korea, everybody else, you guys that are not in East Asia, y'all knew this was going to show up. And then you didn't. What did you do for it, right? And so that's the issue. Not you personally, but the countries where you're at. What was done to prevent it from exploding? Once you had people that were confirmed with the virus in your country, that's not China's fault anymore that this was mishandled in other countries. It's not China's fault that people were flying on Thanksgiving. The government should have shut that down. Do you know what I mean? It should have provided like a need to fly kind of one-on-one basis, but just flying for the holidays, shut that down. That would have been appropriate. They did not do that. It's the same in the UK. People traveling for Christmas, that should not have been allowed, right? Same with Japan, not reporting stuff and trying to figure out where to put people. That, the whole cruise ship thing, that shouldn't have happened, right? That's not China's fault. So I don't think we should blame China for the pandemic. Blame China for the outbreak, okay. The fact that it showed up, okay, I guess. But not everything else. Like places in Africa, for example, that are used to these routine outbreaks of things like Ebola. They've done very, very well with the keeping the numbers down for coronavirus. They've done very well with that because they already had this in place on how to stop traffic, how to stop people from moving, how to quarantine people, how to treat people in quarantine, that kind of thing. They knew what they were doing. They treated it appropriately. New Zealand shuts everything down, did a very good job with that. The rest of us, that's our fault. That's just our fault. You know what I mean? Let's see what you guys have said. Amazon delivers to my order too fast. To me, waiting is the best part of shopping. Right. If you haven't forgotten what you've ordered, then did you even order it? Oh, good. Hello, Ratza. Welcome. Summer, hello. But it looks like the message has been retracted, so I haven't been able to see what you wrote. I agree 100%, but we had no leadership, zero leadership from the 45. We had no government. Did you miss that? Oh, okay. Lee, so okay. Why, there was local government, right? That was a thing. But again, this is not China's fault. So that wasn't the issue here isn't how did it get out of hand? Obviously, the U.S. had a lot of problems in that. The question that the person had presented was, should China be blamed for the fact that it exploded in other countries? And that's why I'm saying no. It's not China's fault that President Trump was elected and didn't know what he was doing. It's not China's fault that the governors in individual states in the United States didn't know what they were doing. And by the way, the United States is not the only place, right? So it's a pandemic. It's not a U.S. epidemic, okay? So we're also talking about places like France. We're talking about places like Spain. We're talking about places like Germany and the UK and Canada and all these other places too. So it's not just, hey, I'm looking at you, the United States. We're talking about the fact that it is a pandemic. it exploded in several countries, in most countries around the world. That's not China's fault that these other countries didn't have their stuff together. Do you know what I mean? That's what we're saying. It's not asking how the US specifically messed up. Is China responsible for other governments not taking proper precautions? And I would say no. Authoritarianism would have been the only solution. It definitely is China's fault. They allowed international flights, knowing there was a contagious and deadly virus. Right, it's their fault that it spread into other places. I'm not saying that they're not at fault, but I'm saying the idea that it's China's fault that other nations didn't take the precautions they should have. That's not their fault, right? It's not their fault. It would be like trying to think of like a comparison analogy or something. It would be like if the printer at work broke. So I told all the students, we're going to be doing our exam online. You have to be ready to be online at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. It's not their fault the printer broke. But if I let them know this every single day for 2 weeks, and then on exam day, they show up in school and they say, wait a minute, where's my exam? How come you didn't print it out for me, teacher? That's not my fault. It's not their fault the printer broke, but now that it was known and there were ways for them to still succeed, it's not my fault or the printer's fault or the school's fault that they didn't pay attention and get their stuff together and make preparations for it. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Let's see. The disease came in through Europe. No. So Lee, I think you're still focusing just on the United States. I'm not sure why that is. Lee, I don't want to sound rude here, but there are other countries, right? There's people in this chat from other countries. So if you're just talking about, well, it came in from Europe to the United States, okay, that might not be applying to what that person is talking about. But the person is saying flights out of China first, step one. So whether it came to the U.S. Through a different route, that's not directly relevant to what we're talking about in terms of it spreading outside of China in the first place. Yeah. Let's see. No plans to vaccinate. Yeah, I mean, I would say that there is a lot of blood on his hands. I would definitely agree with you there. I'm not discounting that, but we're talking about a worldwide situation, and you're talking about a U.S. problem specifically. So that's what maybe the difference is here. What nonsense, local government? Why do you think there's a federal government? So the federal government, of course, has its role, but in the case of the federal government not providing public health stuff, of course that's going to be something that the local government is going to want to do. So it can't do stuff like suddenly come up with a bunch of money to afford PPE, okay, but something like people cannot buy a bunch of masks in our state so that we have masks available for those that actually need it, that would have been an appropriate measure. But instead, what we saw in the US was panic purchasing and then overcharging for reselling stuff. And that didn't happen in most other places. That didn't happen here. So what we did here was we had a different type of system that we would only be allowed to buy certain types of masks. And then eventually the N94 masks, we could only buy 2 of those every week per person. So that way the people that needed it had the right amount of masks. That could have been something implemented by the local government, right? A city government could have done that. A state government definitely could have done that. But they didn't. So yes, it's Trump's fault in a lot of ways. But if we recognize, wow, the federal government is kind of screwed up right now. Okay, what can we do for our states, right? They could have banned interstate travel. They could have tried doing stuff like that. That they just didn't do. So sort of a desperate time comes from desperate measures, that kind of thing. But yeah. So Lee, if you're going to say nonsense and more nonsense, you do want to be a bit more specific. because there is a lag between that. And of course, just saying this is nonsense doesn't rebut the position. So based on where we were, I think you were saying it's nonsense to recognize this is a worldwide pandemic and not a US specific problem. Gosh, I hope not. I hope I'm wrong there. Let's see. Donald Trump fired everyone involved in dealing with the situation. Right. I definitely agree with that. Nuance can be difficult and people tend to get hyper-focused on their own situation, lose sight of the big picture. Yes, I agree. Especially since you guys are limited to 200 characters. I understand that. So in those cases, in the past, we've just done like the arrow thing. And so that way, if you guys are writing more than one thing, I will read it when you're finished typing everything out. Or you can just go to the Discord. But to just, yeah, to look at a worldwide problem and only focus on the United States, I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? That's part of why it's such a problem. We have to look at it as a group effort, right? And it's again the idea of, okay, well, former President Trump didn't help us. That's true. I mean, there are so many ways this should have been handled, and it wasn't. Okay, so what can we do now at like a local level, right? And that's kind of the thing that I try to tell my students as well. This sucks, and I'm very sad that this had to happen at this time. This is, I mean, it sucks for everybody, but being a teenager at this time, you're feeling emotions more strongly. What a bad time for this to happen, for sure. But then it's the situation, And so I said it's not fair and it shouldn't have happened, but it has happened. So what are you guys doing to keep your mental health in check, to keep your physical health, positive, and so, or in a good place? Yeah, it sucks, but we can't just keep saying, well, this shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened. We have to figure out, okay, it did happen. What can we do right now to fix it? And then once it's over, how do we prevent it in the future? And that's one of the reasons I think there should be some kind of, I don't know, punishment or something for the Chinese government, perhaps, if that's the thing that we can do globally. Some kind of sanction, I'm not sure. Or even just saying, officially, China was at fault for this, and just that negative association with it perhaps would encourage them to work better. I was hoping this wouldn't happen because of what happened with SARS-1 and how they tried to hide it. I was hoping they would do a better job with that, and they didn't. So perhaps this very negative association, negative publicity, would maybe make China work harder in the future. Maybe. I'm not sure what would be an appropriate way to punish a nation's government on a global scale. I don't know what would be appropriate for that. I think it should happen, but also we should all look at our individual situations and say, how did we handle this? Did we handle this correctly? In the future, what could we do? And I think every nation has to figure that out, and I think every person has to figure that out as well, especially if they happen to infect other people. If they wouldn't stop going out, brought back the virus to their home, and happened to kill somebody in their family because of that, they need to think about, okay, I need to take this stuff more seriously. I need to remember I'm part of a society, and if I don't want to be part of a society, I do have the freedom to move off into the forest and live off, the land. That's a choice. But if you want to live in a society, the whole purpose of the society is so we all can work together and benefit each other. And that means there's some things that are not going to be super comfortable for me, that I'm going to have to give up some small things for the public good, right? Taxes is one of them. Wearing a mask in public, don't go out when I don't have to go out. Those things are for the public good, because I've chosen to stay in a society. If I've decided I don't want to deal with that, I have the option to leave. And so that's kind of what I think people have to remember. The whole purpose of a society isn't for us to be selfish. That is the opposite. I'm just going to touch on what you guys are saying here, and then it's time for me to go after this, as my lunch break is almost over. In Africa, people take their Sunday pill, as they call it. The hydroxychloroquine pill was given to them for treatment of malaria, to prevent getting malaria. That's why COVID-19 has been low. I haven't heard any updates on that hydroxychloroquine, or hydroxychloroquine, sorry. I haven't heard any updates on that as far as was this actually effective. But I do know that one of the reasons that, especially like sub-Saharan Africa and West Africa, were doing so well with this is because they already had the Ebola containing protocols in place. Places like South Africa that don't really get Ebola outbreaks, it's spread there. It is an epidemic there. But in the places that are used to handling Ebola outbreaks, they are not having as much of a problem. So I know that that was a contributing factor. An old lady who died of COVID told a nurse that it was a hoax until the last minute of her life. Is that the Chinese fault? Right. That's, man. I mean, that's an education issue, isn't it? That's just an education issue. Talking to my students, they are surprised just how scientifically illiterate a lot of people in places like the United States are, and other places that are highly religiously influenced, like Pakistan, for example. That's something that they have a hard time with. This idea that they want to get evolution taken out of textbooks, or how come people don't understand, put a mask on, there's a airborne virus, how come they don't understand that? And it's hard to have to explain that because it's such a different concept to them, and we just kind of use it as that teachable moment, I guess. This is why it's so important that even if you're not going to major in science, this is why it's still important to be basically scientifically literate. Yeah. Extend my lunch break. I can't. I have work. I wish I could just extend it, but no, it is not my choice. On that note, I'm going to head out. See you guys later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.